Before the wars, before the borders, before the modern world drew its lines across the map, there was Persia, one of the oldest civilizations on Earth, a land that gave humanity its first declaration of human rights. The Cyrus Cylinder, a land that built empires not merely by the sword, but by philosophy, poetry, and the pursuit of light over darkness. For thousands of years, the Iranian plateau stood at the crossroads of the world, where east met west, where trade routes carried silk, spice, and ideas. Empires rose and fell. Alexander marched through, Mongols swept across, and yet Iran endured. But by the 19th century, the great powers of Europe, Britain, and Russia began to eye this ancient land for its strategic position and its resources. Persia became a Hispania, and its people began to ask a question that would define the next century. Who are we, and who gets to decide our future? In 1908, oil was discovered beneath the Iranian soil. It was a gift of immense wealth and a curse that would reshape everything. By the 1950s, a democratically elected prime minister named Mohammad Mossadegh dared to do what many called impossible. He nationalized Iran's soil. He believed that the wealth of this land belonged to its people. He was a man of law, of principle, of hope. For a brief shining moment, it seemed Iran would chart its own course. But in 1953, a CIA and MI6-backed coup overthrew Mossadegh. The Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi was reinstated. The West had its ally. Iran had lost its choice. For the next 25 years, the Shah modernized the nation, but dissent was crushed. Voices were silenced, and a deep wound formed beneath the surface. In 1979, that wound erupted. The Islamic Revolution swept away the monarchy and installed a new theocratic government under Ayatollah Khomeini. It was a revolution driven by a genuine longing for justice and self-determination, even as the world watched in uncertainty. Iran had spoken, history would now turn on a new axis. Fire and Blood, the Iran-Iraq War 1982-1988, less than a year after the revolution, war came knocking. In September 1980, Iraqi forces under Saddam Hussein invaded Iran. The war that followed would last 8 devastating years, one of the longest and bloodiest conflicts of the 20th century. Over 1 million lives lost, cities shelled, chemical weapons used against soldiers and civilians alike. And yet, in the face of catastrophe, something extraordinary happened. An entire generation of Iranians, many barely old enough to serve, answered the call, not only out of duty, but out of love. Love for their land, love for their families, love for a future they could not yet see but dared to believe in. When the ceasefire finally came in 1988, neither side had won, but Iran had survived. Through chemical attacks, international isolation, and overwhelming odds, this ancient nation had not broken. The people of Iran had looked into the abyss and chosen to keep living. The graves of that war are now places of pilgrimage, not monuments to hatred, but to the boundless courage of ordinary people. That is the inheritance Iran carries forward. Sanctions, nuclear ambitions, and the world stage, 1990s-2010s. After the war, Iran turned inward and looked upward. The nation that had been attacked with chemical weapons denied to it by the international community began to build hospitals, universities, infrastructure, and yes, a nuclear program. Despite decades of crippling economic sanctions, Iran became one of the most educated nations in the Middle East. Women outnumbered men in universities, engineers and scientists emerged from cities that outsiders only knew as sources of conflict. A generation of young Iranians grew up connected to the world through the internet, hungry for engagement, not confrontation. In 2015, history paused to take a breath. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the Iran nuclear deal, was signed. For a moment, diplomacy had triumphed. Sanctions began to ease. Iran began to open. Tourists arrived. Business returned. It was proof of what was possible. That dialogue, however difficult, could move mountains. Beneath the political struggle, the Iranian people had never stopped living. Music, art, film, and literature flourished. Iranian cinema won awards on every continent. Persian poetry trended on social media. A culture 3,000 years old had found new ways to speak to the world, and the world was listening. A region in transformation, conflict, proxy wars, and shifting alliances, 2010s-2023. The Arab Spring of 2011 shook the foundations of every government in the region. Wars erupted in Syria, Yemen, and Libya. The Middle East entered one of its most turbulent periods in living memory, and Iran, with its vast network of regional alliances and its ideological commitments, found itself deeply embedded in these conflicts. Critics pointed to Iran's involvement in Syria, Yemen, and Lebanon as destabilizing. Iran's leaders argued they were resisting encirclement, protecting allies, projecting strength. Whatever the perspective, the truth was this: a region in pain needed more than weapons. It needed a future, and quietly, amidst the geopolitical storm, signs of progress endured. Life expectancy in Iran rose. Infant mortality fell. Renewable energy projects launched. Iran signed climate agreements. Iranian engineers helped design infrastructure across the region. The human story, the story of builders, not destroyers, continued to write itself in the margins of history. Then, a breakthrough. In 2023, Iran and Saudi Arabia agreed to restore diplomatic ties. Two regional giants, rivals for decades, chose the table over the battlefield. It was a quiet, profound signal. In the Middle East, even the deepest enmities can thaw. By early March 2026, as the immediate fighting subsided, the Middle East stood at a precarious crossroads. The recent eruption of direct warfare between Iran, Israel, and the United States marked not merely another chapter in a long-standing conflict but a fundamental shift in how these powers confront one another militarily and politically. Civilians across the region faced heightened danger. Cities endured constant missile alerts, and the world's major powers watched anxiously as diplomatic channels narrowed under the weight of renewed hostilities. Policymakers and analysts are grappling with a pressing question. Will this latest escalation fade into yet another cycle of tension? Or will it ignite a broader and more sustained confrontation with consequences far beyond the Middle East? Experts warn that without a comprehensive diplomatic strategy, cycles of retaliation and preemptive strikes could draw in additional states or non-state actors, reshaping alliances and redefining global security for years to come. At the same time, others suggest that the enormous human and economic costs, from civilian casualties to disruptions in energy markets, may eventually force a return to negotiation, albeit from a far more fragile and dangerous position than before. For a generation that has grown up with this conflict as a persistent backdrop, the events of 2025 and 2026 underscore a sobering reality. Even in the absence of formal declarations of war, the confrontation between Iran, Israel, and the United States has become one of the most enduring and consequential struggles of the modern era. Whether it ultimately resolves through negotiated settlements or escalates into an even deeper confrontation remains uncertain. Yet its impact on international relations, regional stability, and global peace is both profound and lasting.